What's up? We are back in the book of Philippians this week. It's our second week, second chapter. You guys are so stinking smart. I know you knew that already, but I just felt the need to say it. So, uh, I'm learning as we go. I watched back last week's video. There's no way I'm gonna read through the chapter again. It's just not. I know it's not the best, but I'm learning, so I don't know what is the best. So this week I'm gonna be like, you should read the chapter on your own right now. And as we talk about it, I'll talk about the parts. When I talk about the parts that are pertinent to what we're talking about, then I'll read little bits of the passage instead of, reading the whole shebang all at once, because I just feel like that wasn't the most compelling video material. So last week we talked about a little bit of the background of the book and how, this was like an encouraging letter, like, dang, you guys are killing it. Thank you for the encouragement and the support, right? And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about this book is because you guys have been killing it while this world is crazy and everything is turned upside down for you guys. So chapter 2 continues that, but there's this very interesting section that there's been a lot of if you're a Bible nerd, Philippians chapter 2 is a lot of discussion around part of this chapter. So pause the video. Well, not just yet, but get ready to pause the video. Go ahead and read the chapter and then unpause the video. Pause the video now. And welcome back. Pretty interesting chapter. So that section where it's all indented strangely, right? The reason it's indented that way is because Bible scholars, big brain people think that this is either something that Paul wrote as a poem or a song, or it's actually something that Paul is lifting, like a poem or a song that was famous almost at the time, and Paul is inserting it in this part of the letter as something that all of these people would recognize. And we do that today. I mean, that's basically what memes are. Memes are we all know this thing. Here's how it's recontextualized, right? And that's kind of what he's doing. So I want to look at that really quick, and then we'll move on to kind of the middle chunk and talk about one idea from that really quick. So I'm going to read that little poem, and then we'll talk about it. It says this: who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Sorry for the jingling, that's my cat. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So it's interesting, right? Another reason this is such a famous and much discussed passage is because, right, when we are growing up and we're going to Sunday school and we're going to church, we always hear that Jesus is fully God and fully man. But then there's always but we don't know how that works, or what the interaction between those two is within one physical body, right? This is almost the only passage in the Bible that addresses this topic of God, or Jesus being God and man. And we have this idea of this emptying, right? That Jesus emptied his Godhood, at least in terms of the mind-bending powers and all-knowing, all everywhere form of God. You can't embody that in a person. But I think people sometimes, like, I love the Bible nerds, but they think that they can get hung up on like thinking this passage is about like the mechanics of how God could become a human, which I don't, again, it's like a poem, and poems aren't like instruction books, right? Instead, I think we can understand this passage again as like, how much does God love us? He loves us enough that he would humble himself, right? That he would empty himself to make himself more like us, to live to know and it like what we know and feel what we feel and experience what we experience. That is a God who loves us. That he is not a far away, distant God who does not care. He's a God who is like in it, right? Like with us, right there by our side. And I think that's just another like encouraging thought that Paul is giving this church, that like you are not alone, right? That God has not left us or abandoned us when things are hard. Like Paul's in jail right now, and it is so easy when times are hard, like I know this, to be like, we're alone. No one is out there. No one is watching us. No one cares, right? I know that feeling. But this is telling us, no, it's not true. God actually loves us enough that he would humble himself just to be with us. What an encouraging thought. So let's move on to one last little chunk that I'd like to talk about. So this is almost like immediately right after that poem, starting at verse 14 and going through 15. Let's go, through 15. It says, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Honestly, this is like such a key verse for students, right? I was a junior higher. I was a high schooler. I know what it was like to give lip service to like obedience to my parents, to my teachers, right? To coaches, that you like by some letter of the law, you've done what they asked, but like that you would get a failing grade on your report card as far as like grumbling and arguing, right? And this passage is like, just do what you're supposed to do, right? No grumbling, no arguing, no back talk, right? And like it says that we live in like a broken, messed up world. But by doing this, by being obedient without arguing, without grumbling, right? This will make us like shining stars. And this is also like a concept that you can carry into the workplace. And it doesn't mean that like your boss or your teachers can treat you like trash and you just have to take it. But there's a time and a place, right? There's a time and a place. Maybe you talk to your manager about the way your supervisor is treating you, but you don't have to argue with your supervisor in the heat of the moment, right? If you want to get that shining star, right? Obedience without arguing or grumbling. So, the two things for this week, I want you, if you are feeling alone or discouraged or frustrated, to know that God has loved you enough that he would humble himself just to be with you. That's how much you are loved, right? And then the second thing, I want you, if you feel that inside, that like urge to just say some snide remark as you're about to go do whatever you were asked to do, like stuff it, right? Do what you're supposed to do without grumbling or arguing. That's my encouragement for you today. Next week, we'll get into chapter 3. Until then, toodaloo!